There is a certain kind of person who only starts caring when you no longer leave the door open like you used to. When you answered quickly, they took it for granted. When you explained yourself, they pretended not to understand. When you endured the pain, they called it love. But the moment you step back, slower, quieter, a little colder, you panic, not because they lost you, but because they lost access to you. They lost the right to walk into your mind whenever they pleased. They lost the right to stir up your emotions and leave you to clean up the mess. They lost the right to turn your exhaustion into proof that you still care. And here's the hard truth to swallow. Some people do not love your presence. They love your availability. They love the version of you that stays soft-hearted, the one who always comes back, the one who keeps doubting themselves, the one who leaves the door wide open like some lawless Wild West town with no sheriff, where anyone can ride in and take whatever they want. And the day you finally close the gate, they don't call it a boundary. They call it betrayal. Most relationships do not run on words. They run on invisible emotional contracts. One person always gives in. One person always takes. One person always apologizes. One person always creates chaos, then waits for the other to calm it down. One person is always forced to be the adult in the room, while the other is allowed to act like a wounded child. And that contract keeps going, not because it is right, but because it is familiar. Carl Jung understood this deeply. Human beings do not meet each other only through consciousness. They meet through the unconscious, through unnamed wounds, through the shadow buried beneath the mask of kindness. Some people do not enter your life to love you. They enter it looking for a free emotional regulation system. Your calm makes their chaos easier to bear. Your patience keeps them from having to grow up. Your forgiveness helps them escape consequences. Your silence becomes the stable where their wild ego can run loose without ever being roped in. But one day you stop playing that role, and everything shows its true face. Jung called the shadow the hidden part of us. The part a person denies, rejects, hides, or refuses to admit belongs to them. And the more someone refuses to face their own shadow, the more they need someone else to carry it for them. The controlling person does not say, "I'm afraid of losing power." They say, "I'm just worried about you." The manipulator does not say, "I need you to stay weak so I can feel strong." They say, "You've changed." The emotionally dependent person does not say, "I'm using you to avoid my own emptiness." They say, "You're not the same as you used to be." That is the language of the shadow. It does not walk out into the street like a gunman with a pistol on his hip. It dresses itself in morality. It wears the hat of the victim. It speaks with a sorrowful voice. It pulls you into guilt and pretends it is love. Their shadow does not want to heal. It wants to keep having a place to hide. And for many years, that hiding place was you. You were where they dumped their anger. You were where they unloaded their anxiety. You were where they threw their insecurity, then expected you to turn it into love. You were the well in the middle of the desert, while they kept drawing water without ever asking whether the well was still full or already running dry. Until you stopped allowing it. Until you stopped answering every call like it was a court summons. Until you stopped opening your heart to people who only came to dump their emotional garbage. Until you stopped standing in the red dust like a lone cowboy, trying to save the whole wagon train while you were bleeding yourself. That is when their shadow rises. And they will do what the human ego often does when it gets exposed. They turn you into the villain. There was a version of you that used to be very convenient for other people, but that version was not your real self. It was the version trained to survive. And that version had a few very clear signs. You over-explained, as if the truth only had value when someone else agreed to recognize it. You apologized even when you did nothing wrong. Not because you were guilty, but because you were afraid of tension in the air. You responded quickly to other people's needs, but slowly to your own pain. Their messages sounded like church bells. Your emotions were just the wind blowing across an empty field. You confused being needed with being loved. And that is the sweetest trap of all. Because when someone needs you, you feel valuable. But value is not the same as being used. You endured disrespect and called it compassion. You felt proud of being understanding, when in truth, you were abandoning yourself. You were afraid your boundaries would hurt other people. But you forgot that having no boundaries had been hurting you for years. You believed one more conversation would finally change them. Like a gold prospector driving his shovel into a dried-up patch of dirt, hoping this time, somehow, he would strike gold. But the truth is, the person who truly wants to understand you does not need you to present your pain like evidence in a courtroom. The person who respects you does not need 10 warnings before they stop trampling on your self-worth. And the person who truly loves you does not panic when you begin to love yourself. The body knows before the mind does. That is one of the coldest truths in the awakening process. Before you are brave enough to say, "This person is not good for me," your body has already said it 100 times. It says it through the exhaustion you feel when their name appears on your phone. It says it through the heaviness in your chest before a meeting. It says it through the tightening in your stomach when you hear their voice. It says it through the hours, sometimes even days, you need just to feel normal again after one short conversation. It says it through that strange irritation like a wild horse yanking against the reins because it knows the road ahead is full of traps. But you were taught to doubt yourself, so you ask, am I being selfish? Am I too sensitive? Did I misunderstand them? Should I try harder? No. The real question is, why does my soul always have to pay the price just to keep this relationship alive? Toxic people survive on your confusion, because as long as you are confused, you have not set a boundary. As long as you are analyzing, you have not walked away. As long as you are hoping, the door is still open. As long as you are blaming yourself, they get to ride off clean. The body does not need a long-winded philosophy. It only knows where it is safe and where its life force is being drained dry. And when your body begins to reject someone, that is not coldness. That is a wisdom deeper than reason. If you have ever felt your body recognize the truth before your mind could admit it, comment, "My body knew first." Subtle manipulation rarely shows up by yelling. It comes with a sad voice, with old memories, with guilt, with words that sound soft but sink deep like a dagger hidden under a coat. Here are the lines toxic people often use. 1. You've changed. The real translation, you're no longer as easy to control as you used to be. 2. You never used to be like this. The real translation, I miss the version of you that had no boundaries. 3. I only care about you. The real translation, I need to know why I no longer have the same access to you. 4. You're so cold now. The real translation, I'm uncomfortable because you no longer react the way I predicted. After everything I've done for you, the real translation, I'm turning the past into a lasso to drag you back. 6. Do you think you're better than everyone else? The real translation, your boundaries make me feel small, so I'm going to call them arrogance. 7. I don't even recognize you anymore. The real translation, I only recognize the version of you that used to serve my emotional needs. This is where you have to wake up. Not every sad sentence is honest. Not every tear is innocent. Not every reminder of the past is love. Some people do not miss the memories. They miss the control they had inside those memories. They miss the time when all they had to do was go silent, and you would panic. All they had to do was get angry, and you would apologize. All they had to do was look sad, and you would come back. All they had to do was act wounded, and you would throw your boundaries to the ground like an empty gun. But now you are different, not because you lost your heart, but because you found your backbone. Projection is when people throw the parts of themselves they cannot bear onto someone else. The insecure person calls you arrogant. The controlling person calls you manipulative. The selfish person calls you heartless. The dishonest person becomes obsessed with your loyalty. The person who used you accuses you of abandoning them. That is the ego's oldest magic trick. It does not want to look in the mirror, so it turns you into the projection screen. When you stayed silent, they projected onto you easily. When you took the blame for them, they used you like an empty patch of land to bury their emotional garbage. When you kept explaining yourself, they dragged you into a courtroom where no verdict ever came. But when you keep your distance, the screen disappears. There is nowhere left to project. No one left to absorb it. No one standing still while they take their shot. And that is when the truth comes riding back like a stray bullet through a dusty frontier town. They have to face themselves. This is why they react so strongly. Not because you did something wrong, but because your calm exposes their chaos. Your silence exposes their addiction to control. Your boundaries expose their sense of entitlement. Your growth exposes the fact that they survived for far too long on the unhealed version of you. Jung would call this the moment the unconscious is dragged into the light. And light is not always gentle. Sometimes light feels like the high noon sun in the desert. No shade, no hiding place, no excuses. The brutal truth is this: many relationships do not die because there is no love. They die because too much truth shows up all at once. You begin to see how they are only kind when you pull away, how they only listen when they fear losing access to you, how they only become gentle after they have exhausted you, how they call control care, how they call dependency closeness, how they call your submission a good relationship. And once you see the pattern, you cannot unsee it. That is both the gift and the punishment of awakening. You cannot fully go back to being the old version of yourself. You cannot laugh naturally in a room that once suffocated your soul. You cannot call chaos passion anymore. You cannot call disrespect honesty. You cannot call being drained love. You begin to understand that some people do not hate you because you changed for the worse. They hate you because you stopped playing the role. You are no longer the gatekeeper of their emotions. No longer the free doctor for wounds they refuse to heal. No longer the roadside stop in the middle of the desert where they can ride in, take water, and leave you standing under the burning sun. And yes, clarity can make you lonely, because when you start seeing people clearly, you also lose the ability to pretend the way you used to. You lose a few conversations, you lose a few habits, you lose a few illusions that once made you feel like you belonged. But listen closely. Loneliness in truth is still cleaner than belonging in a lie. Riding alone on horseback through the red desert is still freer than sitting in a noisy saloon with people who only liked you when your head was bowed. Maturity is not always applauded. Sometimes it gets called cold, it gets called selfish, it gets called distant, it gets called not the same as before. Good, you do not need to be the same as before. That old version of you lived far too long just to make other people comfortable. It turned pain into politeness, it turned intuition into doubt, it turned boundaries into guilt. It turned your heart into a public room where anyone could walk in without knocking. Now, the door has a lock, not to punish anyone, but to protect what is inside. Whoever truly loves you will learn how to knock. Whoever only wanted to use you will get angry because they no longer have the key. Do not confuse those two kinds of people. Healthy people are not afraid of your boundaries. They adjust, they respect, they ask, they stay without needing to possess you. Toxic people are different. They call your boundaries distance, they call your silence punishment, they call your calm arrogance, they call your self-respect betrayal. But underneath all those words, there's only one truth. They lost access. They lost the right to make you panic. They lost the right to make you doubt yourself. They lost the right to drag you back into the old loop. They lost the right to turn your heart into a hiding place for their shadow. And here's the final point. Not everyone who loses you actually misses you. Not everyone who says your name loves you. Not everyone who wants you back wants you happy. Some people only miss the feeling of having the right to enter you whenever they wanted. They miss the version of you who opened the door even while you were hurting. They miss the version of you who apologized just to keep the peace. They miss the version of you who betrayed yourself so they would not feel disappointed. They do not miss your soul. They miss their access. If by now you have recognized someone who only loved the easy access version of you, comment, "I closed the door,"